Well, the Ottawa Senators stave off elimination in overtime, and they are forcing a Game 5 back in Toronto against the Leafs. As we welcome you into Toronto Sports Rush, our post-game show for Bet Rivers Network. I'm joined by Pierre McGuire. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks. And this was nothing but a thriller, as we have seen this entire series. Third straight game that has gone to overtime. It's Jake Sanderson that wins it. Pierre, the Leafs had a 4-minute power play, no John Tavares. They seemed to have a lot of opportunities, but it was Ottawa that was able to get it done. Overall, what really stood out about, the Senators being able to stay alive?
They were so resilient, even though they got a 2-0 lead and Toronto came from behind to tie it up. They were still resilient. Talking about Ottawa, they had some great goaltending from Linus Ullmark. The penalty killing, especially as you talked about in overtime after the Batherson high stick, just unbelievable that they were able to pull that off. You nailed it, though, Julie. No John Tavares changes that dynamic number one power play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Just not as good. They looked almost discombobulated in overtime on the power play because there was no John Tavares. He's clearly the glue to a lot of what they do offensively.
Right, and he had made an impact earlier on in the game, being able to get that goal right at the end of the first period to
Mhm.
sort of, I guess, those are, as we know, big moments to be able to carry over potentially momentum and keeping the Leafs in it. Before overtime, what did you like about how the Leafs were able to force overtime? Because they did come from, as you mentioned, they were down to nothing, then they're down to one, and then of course it was Oliver Ekman-Larsson who was able to tie things up.
You know what I really liked was how stout they were defensively. You think about the second period, Ottawa only had one shot on goal. I mean, they were struggling. I think in the third period, they might have had four shots on goal because Toronto was so stout. They were playing an unbelievable high brand of playoff hockey, not just offensively, defensively as well. And you could sense Toronto's urgency. And again, you nailed it. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, great feed from Nylander. He puts it to the back of that, and everybody says, okay, Toronto's going to take this thing over. They wanted to, they tried to, they just couldn't. And again, that speaks to the resolve of the Ottawa Senators. You knew they didn't want to go down on home ice, especially four straight, excuse me. But I tell you one thing right now, that 4-minute power play is something that I think Toronto's coaching staff will look at and say, man, that really hurt us.
Right, and it was, John Tavares went down right in front of the net. It looked like kind of a weird sort of, I don't know what the move would be, but Artem Zub that kind of got him, and I don't know, maybe knocked the wind out of him or something like that. But it was serious enough for him to have to go to the locker room. So, you mentioned that the power play is different without him there, and as someone who doesn't know how to run a power play, obviously it seemed like they were really shooting on the near side of Allmark and not like it just that was not going to be a gateway for them to be able to find success because he was certainly being able to track the puck well. When things are not going well on the power play for you and you're missing a guy that is so pivotal for you, how do you adjust in the moment?
You simplify. You get pucks, you get them to the net. You don't try to make fancy plays. You don't try to dominate people one-on-one or two-on-one. You get pucks back to the point, you get pucks out to the flanks, and you get pucks on goal. You try to take away the goalie's vision. You try to create second and third chance opportunities, but you're not trying to do a lot of toe dragging. You're not trying to make blind backhand passes. You're not trying to do spinoramas. All the things that we kind of saw Toronto do on that power play, those are things you don't want to do. Then they call the timeout, and I think there was 26 or 28 seconds left on the power play when they called the timeout, and they just couldn't do anything with it. They did zero off of it. So again, I think that it's a positive. It's a positive exercise, not negative. They're still up 3-1 in the series, but I think they'll look at that and say, okay, what can we do better? And there's a bunch of things they could do better.
Okay, so what's maybe one or two things? Because we saw that Shane Pinto was also able to score a shorthanded goal earlier on when they did have, um, you know, I'm not exactly sure if he was on the ice at the moment, but John Tavares was involved
Oh
in
yeah,
that power play at the time. But what would you say they needed to fix sort of on the power play going forward?
I just think making better decisions. I think they try to be too cute on the power play. Make
Mhm.
simple, smart, hard decisions. Back to the point, boom, to the net. Over to the flank, boom, to the net. Don't be trying to make all these cute plays. The cross crease seam pass.
Yeah.
It's not always going to work. Just make smart, hard plays. That being said, I got to give this team a lot of credit. I thought they played really smart. I thought they played really hard. The defense doesn't lie. You know, one shot in 20 minutes from the opposition, that's pretty darn good. So I think long term, it's not negative, it's positive, and they'll take a chance or they'll learn a lot from some of the things they did in let's say in the overtime, anyways, that weren't particularly good.
Right. And Leafs fans will, you kind of look at this as there was an opportunity to be able to close out a series for the first time in a sweep in 24 years. And that was sort of hanging in the balance as something that maybe this would be different, but it still doesn't mean you're out of the series. However, a feeling like that could provide maybe a little bit more angst amongst the fan base, amongst just the energy. And even though the team is still playing well, and there's, as we mentioned, positives to take out of this, when you do allow a team to stay in, to not be eliminated, give them a little bit of hope. In what way maybe does it change just the tension, the vibe of this series?
Well, it depends on the leadership that you have. And I think in Toronto's case, there's pretty darn good leadership. It starts behind the bench. You got Stanley Cup winners in Lane Lambert, Mike Van Ryan, obviously Craig Berube, Mark Savard, guys that have been there. They've won the cup. They understand what it takes. You've got players that are part of this. I'm using Tanev and McCabe in particular that are grinding guys. Their physical presence. They've been around the league a long time. They're not going to be intimidated. Oliver Ekman-Larsson won a Stanley Cup last year. He's been through the trials and tribulations of a run to the Stanley Cup. So, Julie, when I look at it, I don't think this team will get frazzled. I don't think they'll panic. I think the biggest thing, though, is the start for game number
Right.
5. If you don't start well in your Toronto, you make Ottawa believe they got a chance to really get back in the series. So you can't mess around on the start. You got to have a really good start. You got to plant a seed of doubt in their minds, and you got to get after them if you're Toronto. If you don't and you allow them to hang around, it becomes a much harder equation for you to figure out during game 5.
Right, and when you look at this game 4 and you look at the stats, and especially even before overtime where the Leafs were out shooting the Senators by almost at points like double. And also the scoring chances overall were in Ottawa's favor, but the fact is that they didn't get as many pucks on net. However, they still were able to keep pace with this game and almost keep that belief of keeping up with the Leafs in this. Who do you sort of attribute that success, that energy to for the Senators when they only had through I guess regulation, I don't know, under 20 shots?
I'd say Brady. Brady Tkachuk was a big part of that. Jake Sanderson, obviously the game-winning goal, but also Jake Sanderson 5-on-5 was tremendous, and he was a massive part of that penalty kill.
Mhm.
Just like Artem Zub was a massive part of that penalty kill. Ridley Gregg. They're a bunch of guys. I'm watching that
Oh,
game
yeah.
tonight, Julie, and I don't know how many people have brought this up. I didn't watch the Canadian feed. I watched the U.S. feed. So Mark Gregg played for the Hartford Whalers. William Nylander's father
Ah,
played for the Hartford Whalers. And Jeff Sanderson who's the father of Jake Sanderson, played for the Hartford Whalers. They're all part of the same team. I coached all 3 of their dads. It's an amazing
wow.
thing to see. I don't know how many people have brought
I
that up, but
didn't know. I've never
I'm
seen that
watching
in a
that.
broadcast been brought up. I think if I'm still on. Am I still on right now? Do we lose Pierre? Okay. Can people see Pierre? Okay, we got Pierre. We got Pierre. All right. We were worried there for a second. You're John Tavares. You went to the locker room. You came back. We missed you for a big part of this show, but you were just discussing about the fact that I mean, I hadn't known the fact that all those guys and their fathers had played for the Hartford Whalers and that also you coached them. Um, okay. So, all right, we're having some technical difficulties right now. Oh, We're back. We just wanted to see if you guys were paying attention as we took a quick timeout here on Bet Rivers, our post-game show for Toronto Sports Rush, as we know that the Ottawa Senators stave off elimination in overtime with a 4-3 win at home and force a game 5 back in Toronto. We'll have to see that entire barn rocking. But Pierre, we were talking about how Brady Tkachuk is a big motor for this team, Jake Sanderson, but you were also discussing just kind of the connection you'd had and noticed with, of course, some of the guys and their fathers that played for the Whalers.
Yeah, it's just mind shattering. I'm watching Ridley Gregg out there. His father Mark played for us in Hartford. I'm looking at Jake Sanderson. His father Jeff played for us in Hartford. And I'm watching Willie Nylander play. And I'm going, oh my gosh, your father played for us too in Hartford. All three guys. I'm not sure that's ever happened in NHL history where you got the sons of three guys that played in the NHL all on one team. And they're all playing against, or two of them are playing with one another, and the other one's playing against them. I think it's pretty neat.
Well, you mentioned Ridley Gregg, and he had that incredible, I guess, save, right? Like when you're trying to save the puck without, like, I guess getting a penalty or anything like that. But he did help out Allmark in that situation. But I want to look at the goaltending. If we break down just uh, Linus Allmark and Anthony Stolarz in this, how would you evaluate both of them?
I thought they were both pretty solid. It's a hard game for Stolarz to play, Julie. You're not getting a lot of shots. You only have one shot in the second period. So every time they do come down and attack you, got to come up large, and then it goes in late into overtime. I'm not sure there's much he could do. I thought Linus Ullmark did some really good things, especially on that 4-minute power play for Toronto. He came up with some big saves, and he was really looking calm, cool, and collected. I thought he'd get frazzled. He did not get frazzled, so I thought that was good. I thought both goalies were good. I know the save percentage probably isn't very good for Stolarz, but I thought he played a good game.
Yeah, it looks like it's 818 save percentage versus 914 for Allmark, but more high danger chances against for Stolarz, 13-5. And that's also kind of the interesting part you mentioned. You have to be really ready because when the Sens did come down on them, like they didn't have a whole lot of shots, the Senators. So then you're kind of not really necessarily getting into that same groove as maybe Allmark is, seeing everything in every moment. Okay, so if we look ahead right now, Sens fans will be partying, and kudos to them. They deserve the win because they scored more goals. Really, that's just what happens at the end of the day. But for Toronto fans watching, Senators are 0-24 in winning a series when facing elimination. So the Leafs obviously have a chance to get it done back on home ice. What's one thing, Pierre, you think that each coach would be saying in the locker room to their team after this game heading into a pivotal game 5?
I don't think Toronto will say very much. Usually you just let it out there. You don't cry over spilled milk. On the other side, you're telling your team, let's bottle this. Let's bring this into Toronto. Let's be ready for game 5 on Tuesday night. And it's a simple, short, hard message, but it's trumpeting what you had accomplished to win in overtime. On the Toronto side, they're a veteran team. I don't think the coach will say too much.
All right. Well, of course, we know that the coach, Craig Berube, knows what it is and what it takes to win, as he did it in 2019 with, as we saw, David Perron, who scored in this game. And I can imagine when you talk about some of these players and they're coaching their dads, you probably feel old. I feel old looking at David Perron and saying, wow, I used to cover him for the Anaheim Ducks back like 8 years ago, and thinking, wow, and he's still playing and he's still has such an impact, and he won a cup with Craig Berube. So there's these young guys out there, but there's also some vets that have really been stepping up.
Yeah, no, well, David Perron's a good example. He did something in hockey that nobody else has ever done. He went from midget AAA to major junior to the NHL in 3 years. I don't believe any player in the history of the modern draft has ever done that. 1 year in midget AAA, 1 year in major junior, and the next year he's in
Wow.
the NHL. It's an amazing story. He was a huge part of the 2008 World Junior team that won over in Pardubice in the Czech Republic, David Perron.
Right.
Claude Giroux was on that team, one of his teammates now in Ottawa.
Right. Yeah,
So
another veteran who obviously has had an impact in this game as well. Okay, so that's it right here for wrapping up game 4. The Leafs are unable to get it done, but we had another third straight overtime game. I mean, it's the excitement, the tension, everything is there. If you're a hockey fan, you're on the edge of your seat for so much of this game. And that means that you'll be back again for game 5. And we will see you guys for game 5. And of course, for McGuire Mondays. And we hope you have a great night. Make sure that you like and subscribe, Toronto Sports Rush and Bet Rivers. And we'll see you next time.